uh, fourth. Now we are going to discuss this. Actually, this is block number fifth. And here we are going to talk about the different variants of English. So, different variants and varieties we would like to talk here. Now, first of all, we are going to talk about pidgin. A pidgin or pidgin language is a simplified version of a language that develops as a means of communication between two or more groups that do not have a language in common. It is most commonly employed in situations such as trade or where both groups speak languages different from the language of the country in which they reside, but where there is no common language between the groups. Fundamentally, a pidgin is a simplified means of linguistic communication. A pidgin is not the native language of any speech community, but is instead learned as a second language. Pidgins usually have low prestige with respect to other languages. So they do not have that kind of respect actually, as you see the standard languages have got. Now we are going to talk about a Creole language. A Creole language, or simply a Creole, is a stable natural language that has developed from a pidgin that is a simplified version of a language. Creoles differ from pidgins because Creoles have been nativized by children as their primary language, with the result that they have features of natural languages that are normally missing from pidgins, which are not anyone's first language. The precise number of Creoles is not known particularly as these are poorly attested. But about 100 Creole languages have arisen since uh, 1500th century and predominantly based on European languages. The Creole with the largest number of speakers in Haitian Creole with about 10 million native speakers. The lexicon of a Creole language is largely supplied by the parent languages, particularly that of the most dominant group in the social context of the Creole's construction. So there are often clear phonetic and semantic shifts. On the other hand, the grammar often has original features that may differ substantially from those of the parent languages. So there are differences actually in Creole language. There are some forms of the standard language actually, and there are sometimes you see phonetic and semantic shifts are also there. There are differences also, but those are not always there actually. You see, the grammatical features, as far as the grammatical features are related, they have the original features actually that may differ substantially from those of the parent languages. So there can be actually variations, differences, and you see, that is why you see they are not given the status of the full-fledged language. Now we are going to talk about code switching, my dear friends. As a matter of fact, we have also talked code switching already in block number 4. There we talked because it came in between. Now, separately we are talking about. In linguistics, code switching occurs when a speaker alternates between two or more languages or language varieties in the context of a single conversation. Multilingual speakers of more than one language sometimes use elements of multiple languages when conversing with each other. Thus, code switching is the use of more than one linguistic variety in a manner consistent with the syntax and phonology of each variety. Code switching is distinct from other language contact phenomena, such as borrowing, pidgins, and creoles, loan translation, and language transfer, language interference. Borrowing affects the lexicon, the words that make up a language, while code switching takes place in individual utterances. Now we come for code mixing. Code mixing refers to the mixing of two or more languages or language varieties in a speech. Some scholars use the terms code mixing and code switching interchangeably, especially in studies of syntax, morphology, and other formal aspects of language. Others assume more specific definitions of code mixing, but these specific definitions may be different in different subfields of linguistics, education theory, communications, etc. Code mixing is similar to the use or creation of pidgins, but while a pidgin is created across groups that do not share a common language. Code mixing may occur within a multilingual setting where speakers share more than one language. Code mixing as code switching. Some linguists use the terms code mixing and code switching more or less interchangeably, especially in formal studies of syntax, morphology, etc. Both terms are used to refer to utterances that draw from elements of two or more grammatical systems. These studies are often interested in the alignment of elements from distinct systems or on constraints that limit switching. While many linguists have worked to describe the difference between code switching and borrowing of words or phrases, the term code mixing may be used to encompass both types of language behavior. While the term code switching emphasizes a multilingual speaker's movement from one grammatical system to another, the term code mixing suggests a hybrid form drawing from distinct grammars. In other words, code mixing emphasizes the formal aspects of language structures or linguistic competence, while code switching emphasizes linguistic performance. So that is the major difference, my dear friends, between, you see, code mixing and code switching. Code mixing emphasizes the formal aspects of language, structures, or linguistic competence. Code mixing, linguistic competence. Code switching, linguistic performance. So these are the things that we have to remember regarding code switching and code mixing. Now we are going to talk about standardization of any language, particularly English. How a language becomes a standard language and how we can call a language a standard language. A standard language, also a standard dialect or a standardized dialect, is a language variety used by a group of people in their public discourse. Alternatively, varieties become a standard by undergoing a process of standardization, during which it is organized for description in grammars and dictionaries and encoded in such reference works. Typically, varieties that become standardized are the local dialects spoken in the centers of commerce and government, where a need arises for a variety that will serve more than local needs. Standard language can be either pluricentric, for example, English, German, Persian, Serbo, Croatian, French, Portuguese, and Spanish, or monocentric, for example, Icelandic, Italian, Japanese, and Russian. Characteristics of standard language. A language that is going to become a standard language that has got some requirement. And the requirement for a variety to be standard is that it can frequently be used in public places or public discourses. The creation of a prescriptive standard language derives from a desire for national, cultural, political, and social cohesion, with this considered requiring an agreed upon standardized language variety. Standard language is commonly feature a recognized dictionary, standardized spelling and vocabulary, a recognized grammar, a standard pronunciation, a linguistic institution defining usage norms, constitutional status, effective public use, a literary canon, convincing convenience speaking, popularity, and acceptance in the community. So these are the prerequisites actually for a language in order to become a standard language. And this is how a language becomes a standard language. Now, my dear friends, we are going to talk about the spread and rise of English. You know, this has become a global language. Everywhere people are speaking this language, and it has become a very powerful language. So there are some issues that are to be talked and addressed, you see. So those issues are going to be discussed in coming slides. This language, English particularly, has revolutionized the world order. English, a language that came from nowhere, is said to conquer the world. 2,000 years ago, the English language was confined to a handful of savages, now forgotten tribes on the shores of northwest Europe. There was no English in England. Today it is used, spoken, or written in some form or the other by perhaps 1.5 billion people around the world. Of the English uses, 350 million use it as the mother tongue, and the rest as a foreign or second language. The spread and rise of English. It is the only language widely used from China to Peru and more scattered than are even any other language in the world. It is estimated that there are even more uses of English than of the Chinese language. A language spoken in 8 different varieties but written in the same way by 1.1 billion people. This never happened with any language in the past, my dear friends. It's a very important phase for English. This has never happened with any language in the past, my dear friends. It has taken an incarnation and reflects itself everywhere, wherever we can see. The information explosion in the world has happened in the English language, and so it has become the language of the information age. English has become almost like a global commodity like oil and the microchip. Without petrol, computers, and the English language, the world will come to a halt. There will not be any movement in the world if these things are not there. And English is one of them. It is no longer the English of one or two nations. As Huntington observes, English is the world's way of communicating internationally and culturally. Just as the Christian calendar is the world's way of tracing time, just as the Arabic numbers are the world's way of counting, and the metric system is. For the most part, the world's way of measuring the English language is no longer a language of national or cultural class identity. It has become a language of technology, of communicational necessity. So everywhere people are using this language, and now this cannot be ignored because it has become a necessity. Everywhere it is being used in all the parts, particularly in computers. It has become the language of computers, so now the situation cannot be avoided. English has few rivals and no equals. Neither Spanish nor Arabic, both international languages, hold sway globally. Germany and Japan may have matched in the commercial and industrial rigor of the USA, but their languages have been invaded by English. Moreover, English is the language of the internet. It is estimated that nearly 80% of all websites use English, and 3/4 of the world's mail, telexes, and cables are in English. The USA has far more computers than the rest of the world cabinet combined, and the USA uses English. English literacy and computer literacy have become inseparable and interdependent. The bulk of software is in English, and all the IT giants like Microsoft and IBM are based in English-speaking countries. Even countries like China and Japan that are strong in computer technology and hardware are forced to use English. The world has become not only Eurocentric, but also Windows-centric. Moreover, the English language has created a market for Indians and Indian products all over the world, whether it is yoga, herbal medicines, Indian spiritualism, or Indian writing in English. There is a global market for these products, provided they are marketed in English. Indian gurus who use English have become globetrotters. India has become a product in the world market. And it is said India will soon become an economic superpower thanks to English. So India is going to become a superpower. India is able to sell the things. India has got the market potentials because of English. It is also reported that many foreigners are coming to India to have the computers, software experience, for medical treatment, to learn yoga, and even for employment, all because India speaks English. Because India speaks English, and India speaks very good English, and this fact is known to everybody in the world. That is why people are interested in coming, because now the world has become like that we have to sell everything in English. If we are able to sell things in English, yes, the world is ready to buy things. So this is what is happening in India. Besides this, English teaching in India is becoming a big business. Every street corner has institutes for spoken English and grammar. Many call centers are appointing English trainers to train people in the appropriate use of English. Style polishing, accent sensitizing, accent neutralizing, English fluency, and cross-cultural communication. Medical transcription centers are also appointing English, are observed in the media and print journalism. Highly qualified Indians are teaching English in many parts of the world: the Middle East, Africa, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, and even the USA and the UK. English is being exported from India. It is true that competent and trained Indians are available at a cheaper rate, but considering the total population of India and the rate of educational unemployment in the country, one can readily say that computer technology, computer-enabled services, and English have proved to be a boon to many English-educated Indians. So this is not the curse actually. There is some kind of benefit also that India speaks English. It is not like that people are available at the very cheaper rate in India. But that is true, considering the other facts also. If we are able to get something with the help of English, that is always good. Now we are going to talk about Indian English, my dear friends. Indian English is the group of English dialects or regional language varieties spoken primarily in the Indian subcontinent. English is the lingua franca of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and is the language of their cultural and political elites, offering significant economic and social advantage to fluent speakers. Though English is one of modern India's 22 official languages, only a few 100,000 Indians have English as their first language. Indian English literature has a relatively recent history. It is only 1.5 centuries old. The first book written by an Indian in English was by Sheikh Deen Muhammad, titled Travels of Deen Muhammad. Muhammad's travel narrative was published in 1793 in England. Early Indian writers used English unadulterated by Indian words to convey an experience which was essentially Indian. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay wrote Raja Ram Mohan's Wife and published it in the year 1864, which was the first Indian novel written in English. Raja Ram, who was born on 1908 and died in 2006, Indian philosopher and writer, authored Kantapura and The Serpent and the Rope, which are Indian in terms and its storytelling qualities. Erskine-born winner of Sahitya Academy Award and author of many novellas, including The Room on the Roof, Flight of Pigeons, etc. So there are many writers, those who worked for the development of English literature, particularly written in India and Indian subcontinent. Rabindranath Tagore wrote in Bengali and English and was responsible for the translations of his own work into English. Then Gopal Mukherjee was the first Indian author to win a literary award in the United States. Neeraj C. Chaudhary, a writer of non-fiction, is best known for his autobiography of an unknown Indian, where he relates his life experiences and influences. P. Lal, a poet, translator, publisher, and essayist, founded a Porus in the 1950s for Indian English writers' workshop. Ramnath Kak, a Kashmiri man, wrote his autobiography, Autumn Leaves, which is one of the most vivid portraits of life in 20th century Kashmir and has become a classic. R.K. Narayan is a writer who contributed over many decades, and he was discovered by Graham Greene in the sense that the latter helped him find a publisher in England. Similar to Thomas Hardy's Bussex, Narayan created his fictitious town of Malgudi, where he set his novels. Some criticized Narayan for the parochial, detached, and closed world that he created in the face of the changing conditions in India at the times in which the stories are set. Others, such as Graham Greene, however, feel that through Malgudi they could vividly understand the Indian experience, simultaneous with Narayan's pastoral idylls. A very different writer, Mulkraj Anand, was similarly gaining recognition for his writing set in rural India. But his stories were harsher and engaged sometimes brutally with divisions of caste, class, and religion. Indian English literature refers to the body of work by writers in India who write in the English language and whose native or co-native language could be one of the numerous languages of India. It is also associated with the works of members of the Indian diaspora such as B.S. Naipaul, Kiran Desai, Jhumpa Lahiri, Aga Shahid Ali, Rohinton Mistry, and Salman Rushdie, who are of Indian descent. It is frequently referred to as Indo-Anglian literature. Indo-Anglian is a specific term in the sole context of writing that should not be confused with the term Anglo-Indian. As a category, this production comes under the broader realm of post-colonial literature. The production from previously colonized countries such as India. Now we are going to talk about the language variation. How the languages, you see, have some kind of variation and how they are different actually from each other or from one another. So in this part actually we are going to talk about the matters that we have already talked in the fourth block. There we talked about the social linguistics part. You see, and you may still remember the name William Labov. So that you see, he was one of the forerunners of the sociolinguistics. Variation in language use among speakers or groups of speakers is a notable criterion or change that may occur in pronunciation, word choice, or even preferences for particular grammatical patterns. Variation is a principal concern in sociolinguistics. Studies of language variation and its correlation with sociological categories such as William Labov's 1963 paper, uh, The Social Motivation of a Sound Language led to the foundation of sociolinguistics as a subfield of linguistics. Although contemporary sociolinguistics includes other topics, language variation and change remains an important issue at the heart of the field. Studies in the field of sociolinguistics typically take a sample population and interview them, assessing the realization of certain sociolinguistic variables. The Bob specifies the ideal sociolinguistic variable to be high in frequency, of a certain immunity from conscious suppression, be an integral part of larger structures, and be easily quantified on a linear scale. Phonetic variables tend to meet these criteria and are often used as are grammatical variables and more rarely lexical variables. Examples for phonetic variables are the frequency of the glottal stop, the height or backness of a vowel, or the realization of word endings. An example of a grammatical variable is the frequency of negative concord, known colloquially as a double negative. There are several different types of age-based variation one may see within a population. They are vernacular of a subgroup with membership typically characterized by a specific age range, age-graded variation, and indications of linguistic change in progress. An example of subgroup vernacular is the speech of street youth. Just as street youth dress differently from the norm, they also often have their own language. The reasons for this are the following: to enhance their own cultural identity, to identify with each other, to exclude others, and to invoke feelings of fear or admiration from the outside world. Men and women on average tend to use slightly different language styles. These differences tend to be quantitative rather than qualitative. This is to say that women use a particular speaking style more than men do, is akin to saying that men are taller than women, i.e., that is, men are on average taller than women, but some women are taller than some men. The initial identification of a women's register was by Robin Lecoff in 1975, who argued that the style of language severe served to maintain women's role in society. A later refinement of this argument was that gender differences in language reflected a power difference dominance theory. However, both of these perspectives have the language style of man as normative, implying that women's style is inferior. Now we are going to talk about the dialect. The term dialect is used in two distinct ways. One usage, the more common among linguists, refers to a variety of a language that is a characteristic of a particular group of the language's speakers. The term is applied most often to regional speech patterns, but a dialect may also be defined by other factors, such as social class. A dialect that is associated with a particular social class can be termed a sociolect. A dialect that is associated with a particular ethnic group can be termed as ethnolect. And a regional dialect may be termed a regiolect or topolect. The other usage refers to a language that is socially subordinated to a regional or national standard language, often historically cognate to the standard, but not derived from it. In this sense, the standard language is not itself considered a dialect. Linguistics register is a variety of a language used for a particular purpose or in a particular social setting. For example, when speaking in a formal setting, contrary to an informal setting, an English speaker may be more likely to use features of prescribed grammar, such as pronouncing words ending in ing with a velar nasal instead of an alveolar nasal, choosing more formal words. For example, father versus dad, child versus kid, etc. and refraining from using words considered non-standard, such as ain't. As with other types of language variation, there tends to be a spectrum of registers rather than a discrete set of obviously distinct varieties. Numerous registers could be identified with no clear boundaries between them. Discourse categorization is a complex problem, and even the general definition of register given above, language variation defined by use, not user. There are cases where other kinds of language variation, such as regional or age dialect, overlap. Consequent to this complexity, scholarly consensus has not been reached for the definitions of terms including register, field, or tenor. Different scholars' definitions of these terms are often in direct contradiction of each other. Additional terms including diatype, genre, text type, style, acrolect, mesolect, and basilect, among many others, may be used to cover the same or similar ground. Connections between linguistic literary criticism and stylistics. Linguistics is the scientific study of language. There are three aspects to this study: language form, language meaning, and language in context. The earliest activities in the description of language have been attributed to Panini with his analysis of Sanskrit in Astadhyay. In linguistics, human language is a symbol of sounds, symbols, and meaning. Phonetics is the study of acoustic, visual, and articulatory properties in the production and perception of speech and non-speech sounds. The study of language meaning, on the other hand, deals with how languages encode relations between entities, properties, and other aspects of the world to convey, process, and assign meaning, as well as to manage and resolve ambiguity. While the study of semantics typically concerns itself with truth conditions, pragmatics deals with how context influences meaning. Literary criticism is the study, evaluation, and interpretation of literature. Modern literary criticism is often influenced by literary theory, which is the philosophical discussion of its methods and goals. Whether or not literary criticism should be considered a separate field of inquiry from literary theory, and conversely from book reviewing, is a matter of some controversy. For example, the Johns Hopkins Guide to Literary Theory and Criticism draws no distinction between literary theory and literary criticism, and most always uses the terms together to describe the same concept. Some critics consider literary criticism a practical application of literary theory, because criticism always deals directly with particular literary works, while theory may be more general or abstract. Stylistics is the study and interpretation of texts in regard to their linguistic and tonal style. As a discipline, it links literary criticism to linguistics. It does not function as an autonomous domain on its own and can be applied to an understanding of literature and journalism as well as linguistics. Sources of study in stylistics may range from colonial works of writing to popular texts, and from advertising copy to news, new fiction, non-fiction, and popular culture, as well as to political and religious discourses. Indeed, as recent work in critical stylistics, multimodal stylistics, and mediated stylistics has made clear, non-literary texts may be of just as much interest to stylisticians as literary ones. Literariness, in other words, is here conceived as a point on a line rather than as an absolute. Stylistics, as a conceptual discipline, may attempt to establish principles capable of explaining particular choices made by individuals and social groups in their use of language, such as in the literary production and reception of genre, the study of folk art, and the study of spoken dialects and registers, and can be applied to areas such as discourse analysis as well as literary criticism. Common features of style include the use of dialogue, including regional accents and individual dialects, the use of grammar such as the observation of active voice and passive voice, the distribution of sentence lengths, the use of particular language registers, and so on. In addition, stylistics is a distinctive term and may be used to determine the connections between the form and effects within a particular variety of language. Therefore, stylistics looks at what is going on within the language, what the linguistic association are that the style of language reveals. So I hope you must have understood the idea behind all of these things. Thank you.